Welcome back to another episode of The Breakaway Show with David and Fabian. It is August 22nd, and man, every day it seems like there's so much happening, especially during the DNC week. And I'm so glad that we're finally at the end of it. The grand finale is here. Maybe we'll finally hear some sort of new policy from Kamala. Well, we've heard some things, but
Yeah, we have.
she earned a new nickname for herself, Flip-Flop Kamala, Communist Kamala,
Kamala.
Chameleon Kamala, everything.
It's getting bad out there for her.
It really is.
And I don't see anything else that she's proposing to help her bump up in the polls. I mean, she's offered basically everything. She's handed out as much as she said she can hand out so far. And the polls aren't getting any better. They're in fact getting worse for her.
Yeah, well, she had her honeymoon phase, and I was worried during that honeymoon phase. And a lot of people like yourself are telling me it's just a honeymoon phase. Don't worry. The second she starts to do anything or that phase actually ends, she will start to go down in the polls. In the poly market polls, which is what I actually trust because people are putting their money down onto it. It's not just some partisan pollsters doing this stuff. It's swinging back up to Trump. He's now up 7% on Kamala again after going down about 3% to her in the same polling market polls that we're talking about. So, Fabian, the DNC, last day of it, and this whole entire week, all I've seen all over Twitter has been a bunch of protesters. They're trying to say that there was about 100,000 Muslim protesters there protesting Israel. Well, not just Muslim protesters, but Muslim leaders said that there's going to be 100,000 protesters protesting Israel at the DNC, protesting Democrat support for the Israel. And I can't lie, the funniest video I've seen the entire week so far was Vivek confronting these protesters.
Yep.
And this guy telling him, you got to get out of here. We don't want you here. Well, it's America, dude. First of all, I have a right to be here. It's a public place. And second of all, that protester was calling Vivek racist.
A racist?
A racist. Okay. So tell me, how does that make sense? Is it just because he supports Israel he's racist? He's not even this pro-Israel guy. He understands their benefit in a relationship with Israel, but he's definitely more on the side of being more fiscally conservative with our funding towards them. But to call Vivek racist?
Against who, though? Did he say racist against who?
No.
Okay, it's just a blanket term racist.
Blanket term like the left likes to engage in. They like these buzzwords: genocide, apartheid, white supremacist, racist, Zionist, all this stuff.
We should make a leftist buzzword bingo sheet. And if you hear the sheet, you have to do something like hierarchy, patriarchy, cis non-conforming, blah, 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 blah. How many genders are, like, all this stuff. It needs to be put into a bingo card so you can check them off and say, oh, look, they're being good little leftists and checking off all the boxes.
You can make that into a drinking game and then you'll be drunk the first 10 minutes. But one more thing before we switch gears, that the DNC, outside the DNC, actually Congresswoman Ilhan Omar spoke today.
Oh, she did?
In
English?
In English, believe it or not. But I think that she was chanting a little bit of Somalian in there, here and there. But what was she saying on stage? What was she saying on stage?
Probably not much. Probably divisive language, and we need Kamala in office so we can do more leftist policies and make it better for Somalians. And all that.
Well, she's not so much like supportive of Kamala, obviously not of Trump, of any candidate right now, because they won't divest from Israel. So, and I remember what she was chanting, or what was she saying during that speech? She was saying that we need to force Israel into a ceasefire. My question is this to Ilhan Omar and to the AOCs and all Democrats that support this. Who are you asking for a ceasefire with? With Hamas, who breaks the ceasefire every time? Every ceasefire we've had since October 7th has been broken by Hamas. So when they get this ceasefire and it's broken again by Hamas, are they just going to repeat themselves again, and it's going to be this repetitive cycle?
Of course,
ceasefire. Like,
that's it. No, you're exactly right. That's what it's going to be, because they don't want a true solution. If there's a solution, they lose all the ammunition, all these fired up people that they've been able to indoctrinate. They want this to continue as long as they can, so that they can use this issue as long as they can.
I think you're right, because I think that's the only way that they're really staying relevant. And we know a lot of people like that perhaps we can now switch gears to, is Candace Owens, that is going
Candace
off into
Owens.
a bunch of various different conspiracies. You know, she pisses me off about her rants about Israelis and Jews and stuff like that. But today she pissed you off because...
She did piss me off because she went to my favorite topic, which is space.
Oh, not space with Fabian.
And look, if you're talking space, I know I may not look like a space guy, but I'm a space guy.
He's a space nerd, guys.
I'm a space nerd guy. So when you go out and you say these things, it really pisses me off. And, you know, it wasn't just me that she pissed off. In fact, the guy who Elon Musk interviews the most with when it comes to space things, which is a guy named Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, he even came out and wrote a post on X about how off she was and why she was off. So it's interesting because, you know, she came out and I guess now she's a denier that we ever went to the moon. I didn't know this.
Yep.
But now she says it's impossible for us to have gone to the moon because astronauts could not have passed by something called the Van Allen belts. And these
What is
belts,
that?
so the Van Allen belts are just it's a belt around the Earth of radioactive particles that comes from the sun, right? We have magnetism in the Earth, and they get wrapped around the Earth into this little donut-looking thing around the Earth, right?
Oh, I've seen this on pictures before. It's like little asteroids, rocks looking things around the Earth, right?
Yes,
Got it.
those would be the Van Allen belts, and then farther out you have the actual asteroid belt and a bunch of stuff, but that's over by Jupiter. But the one that she's specifically mentioning is this belt that has radioactive particles, and she's saying it's impossible for us to have gone to the moon because humans cannot go through this Van Allen belt because they'll be fried, they'll be dead. Now, what she
And
doesn't know,
What's the evidence behind this?
well, this is her evidence that it's impossible to pass because there's radiation.
Okay.
But I don't think Candace Owens understands that there's different kinds of radiation. For instance, we get sunburn at the beach. That's UV radiation, ultraviolet. That can be stopped with a simple fabric on your shirt.
Okay.
Now there's alpha, there's beta, and there's neutron, and there's gamma radiation in addition to that UV. I mean, there's many kinds. So alpha particles you can block with a piece of paper. Beta particles you can block with aluminum or any kind of metal. And then gamma radiation, you block with lead. This is why in big nuclear reactors, there's a lot of lead around to keep all that from seeping out. Well, in these Van Allen belts, it's pretty much just A and B radiation. So you can block them with something as thin as a few millimeters of aluminum. But I don't think she knows that. She then said that the temperature was 2,000 to 4,000 degrees Kelvin. So it's impossible. You would have been burned if you were out there. And yeah, that's true if you had no spacesuit, if you had no spaceship around you. But the fact that we have these really negates it. And the other thing that she said is, she said we can't go through them. Well, they don't extend around the entire Earth. The northern southern parts really don't have any of the Van Allen belts. It's only in certain latitudes that it's affected. So all NASA did was like, yeah, we can go through them, but let's just go above it, more north. So you don't really ever get into the really bad part, which you could do. Now, here's a funny thing. After all of this stuff that she said, Everyday Astronaut came out and kind of proved her wrong, okay? But now Polaris Dawn, which is a SpaceX mission that's going to go to space and do the first spacewalk of humans in a very, very long time, and the first private commercial spacewalk not funded by governments or not of a government entity, they're going to pass through the Van Allen belts. They're actually going to be in the Van Allen belts. So what you're going to say in a week when they start walking outside of the Dragon spacecraft is you're going to say that SpaceX is faking it too?
You know what she's actually going to say? She's not going to say anything because she's not going to mention it. And she's going to not ever go back to the fact that she brought this ever up, that the moon landing was fake and whatnot. I almost feel like this is something that people like Candace tend to do to stay relevant. They try to dive into these pretty outrageous conspiracies, shine some light in them to allow a base that actually wants light to be shone onto these conspiracies, right? And it's essentially feeding into a certain demand.
Yep.
So when various things like this come out, she's not going to care about that, or she's going to tell you, so what, Fabian? And then she's going to go to the next thing, right?
Well, you know what? This actually really connects things for me because I don't know enough about the Jewish stuff to comment on, right? I go to you for that. And I've been listening to you talking about what she's been saying. But now I see what she's doing because I understand what she's talking about.
Yeah.
And exactly what you said is true. She picks these little things. So she marries a truth with a lie. So she puts a little bit of truth in there, but then she makes the assumption or she makes the conclusion, something that really shouldn't be made just because you have this little piece of evidence or this piece. It doesn't mean that the entire thing is a cabal by people trying to take over the country. So I'm glad I saw that.
And I actually brought this up to you earlier today. I said, I wonder why a lot of these people do this, like Andrew Tate, Candace Owens. Now, why do they say a lot of true stuff and then the conclusion is just outrageous? And you said this is a common tactic by communists or using communism or Marxists, right? Is that they tend to bundle in with their propaganda or the narrative that they're trying to portray a lot of truth. So it's kind of like it's a guise, essentially.
Yes, it is. It's called a fertile fallacy. So they do this.
There's even a term for it.
It's called a fertile fallacy. And in fact, climate change does the exact same thing. They take these readings on these different instruments and they say, well, our computer model says that this is going to be the outcome, that we're all going to die. So it takes these, data, which obviously could be manipulated, and then draws this massive conclusion like climate change is going to kill us all.
I feel like that's what they're doing. They're taking a lot of different facts, manipulating it, and trying to form a narrative around it that is supported by all these various things. They're just, it's It's pretty crazy. So I'm glad today that she pissed you off, because she's been pissing me off for a while now. Because I'm like, I think to myself, is Candace this stupid? No. Did she really flip flop this much on her overall Israel position because of what she's seen after October 7th? I don't think so. I think that Candace just wasn't as relevant as she is currently now. And she realized, okay, what do I need to do to maybe go viral again, to be relevant in this new independent community? And she chose her new enemies, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think like the Andrew Tates and now Bazarians getting involved in the political movement, etc. As I said before, I think he's trying to reinvent himself to stay relevant, because the whole Playboy stuff is kind of falling flat on deaf ears now, because, you know, the same thing over and over again. However, I think someone like Andrew Tate, now that I've listened to him more than I ever had in the past, just because he's on a lot of places in Twitter, etc., I think he understands social issues with a good degree of intelligence, but the conclusion he draws from those little things are erroneous. So same with Candace. She's obviously a very intelligent person, but I think she's getting information that she's linking to possibly personal vendettas that she has, maybe with Ben Shapiro or
exactly.
people in the industry, maybe Jewish, that have said, hey, you can't say this stuff, you're going too far. And now she's taking it personally and drawing these really overarching conclusions. I've told you many times, there's nobody in an entire culture. You're going to have people from whatever culture, whatever race, whatever country. There's going to be bad people. There's always going to be bad people. People around the world say that about us. People are making videos about how America is evil. I mean, this is around the world. So for us to say, oh, those people are evil, like, dude, everyone's saying that about us too. And we're saying that about everyone else. It's the same thing.
It is. It's exactly that. Yeah, it's a weird time, honestly. And we talked about this yesterday. I have no idea why they're so hyper-focused about this just 75 days before the election. In no way whatsoever is this helping Trump win. Every time she talks about Israel, it's just dividing the Republican Party more. Yep. And it's essentially given a weapon against us to be used by the left to kind of destroy us. So
yeah, also it's interesting that she's not, I mean, as far as I know, she's not at the DNC.
Nope.
I know people from Daily Wire were there. Charlie Kirk went there from Turning Point USA. A lot of people in the conservative movement have gone there. I'm not saying it's anything weird. She might be busy, but I would assume that she'd be there just to, be on the ground and get some solid information firsthand.
Yeah, no, exactly. Speaking of the DNC, I just actually saw this because you sent it to me. Kamala's VP Tim Walz had a private meeting with Alex Soros.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and for the people that don't know, Alex Soros is obviously the son of George Soros, who handed over the empire to him about 6 months ago to a year. And the interesting thing about Alex Soros is that now he's also recently engaged to who?
Exactly. Who? Huma Abedin.
Yes, Huma Abedin. And the craziest thing, Huma Abedin, I don't know what's up with her. Like,
can you explain who she is to
yeah.
people who don't know who she is?
Yes, of course.
This is crazy. This is really, really, really crazy.
It is crazy. And it's just so weird that she likes Jewish white boys because of what I'm about to explain. So Huma Abedin, she's famous for the fact that she was one of the highest aides to Secretary Hillary Clinton. She was also married to Anthony Weiner, who was a congressman that was charged and prosecuted and found guilty for sexting underage girls. They got divorced. Recently, she met her new lover, her new white Jewish boy lover.
Weird how that happens.
Alex Soros. But the interesting thing about Huma Abedin is that she comes from a pretty unique family, I would say. So her dad was in charge of this Muslim publication. I always forget, Muslim something. We'll have to look exactly into it. And that publication was actually sympathetic to Islamic fundamentalism.
Go figure,
right? Especially what is that very radical Muslim organization?
The Muslim Brotherhood?
The Muslim Brotherhood, thank you. So he passed away. And the mother took over the publication, and Huma was one of the senior editors of the publication.
Wow.
Right? So and the reason why there's actually connections to the Muslim Brotherhood is because a lot of the people who funded the publication are predominant leaders in the Muslim Brotherhood organization, in the Muslim World League as well, which is another overarching, essentially, organization of the Muslim Brotherhood. And they espouse very radical views. They want to have an Islamic caliphate. They want Sharia law to be implemented worldwide. For the people who don't know what Sharia law is, just very extreme Muslim law.
Meaning like women can't drive, women can't go to school, women have to wear headscarves. It's really, really bad.
Women can be sentenced to jail for life for speaking out if their husband beat them or whatever it is. There's various things that are surrounded about Sharia law, but that's where Huma Abedin comes from. Now, I always say you're not guilty by association, but she was the senior editor of this publication. And I'm not saying by any means that she has any ties to the Muslim Brotherhood, but what are we seeing play out in front of us? You have Huma Abedin, now the fiance of Alex Soros, who is the son of George Soros, who loves destabilization, funding these radical leftist groups, whether they are pro-Hamazi groups or whatever it is. The encampments that we saw, he was funding student leaders to organize that, $5,000, just 8 hours of their work, right?
Wow. Sign me up.
Right? Sign me up, right? So now we got Alex Soros in charge of this huge empire, in charge of so much money, married to Huma Abedin, who seems to be a sympathizer of the Muslim world, of the radical Muslim world. And they are meeting with who? None other than Tim Walz.
Mr. Commie, Tim Walz, who has been in China over 30 times, who had his honeymoon on the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, or who got married, on the anniversary. This is just weird all around. And, one thing that I think is really interesting, David, is that in the media right now, you're hearing a lot of stuff about Jewish people, the Jews, blah, blah, blah. You don't hear anything about the Muslim Brotherhood. Anything. They've done a very good job at making it the third rail of, I guess, politics now, I guess you could say, where you never hear about it whatsoever. But they say 100,000 people are going to show up, or showed up to the DNC, organized by Muslim leaders. Mm-hmm. That's really interesting for people to think about.
You know what it is? Actually, it's their mission, because they understand that they will overpopulate us, because Muslim is the fastest growing religion that there is. They believe that there will be more than 50% of people who practice any religion will be Muslims by 2040 or whatever it is. So they understand who their enemy is. It's not just Jews, but it's also Christians. And what is the best way that you can fight both religions at once?
You make them destroy each other.
Exactly. Fabian.
This is actually the letter that I posted. I forget I think it's like Messier or something like that. He was a 33 degree Mason. And this is before the World Wars. He released a letter basically summing up. He said there has to be 3 world wars. And he laid out exactly how things were going to go. And he basically said the last one is going to pit all religions against each other and let them destroy each other.
You're talking about the Albert Pike letters.
Albert Pike letter. Yeah. I'm sorry. He wrote it to a guy named Messiaen or something like
correct.
that.
And he wrote this in the 1860s, right? He said, this is how I believe any world wars will occur. And he exactly explained how World War I will occur and start over what. He explained World War II will be this fight between fascism and anti-fascism, communism versus capitalism and democracy. And then he specifically said that there will be a third world war. And this will be different than the previous 2 because there will be a clash of civilizations between various religious groups, specifically the Arab world attacking the Western civilizations. And that is exactly what is playing out here. If all these, sheeps and I will actually go as far as saying this, that Candace Owens seems to be either a useful idiot or a grifter here. Because if she actually believes in this, she is a useful idiot. Once she ushers in this massive power of Islam, essentially, they're going to target her immediately.
Absolutely, because
right?
she's not one of them. And she just converted to Catholicism. So why? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, it's
That's
very,
weird.
It's very interesting. But maybe to go a little bit away from this, but kind of still stay in the same topic, I actually tweeted this today. I said that as someone who is Jewish and born in Jerusalem, if you're a Jew who supports Israel and somehow is voting for Harris Walt's ticket, then I just don't understand you whatsoever. And I want to unpack that briefly because I'm not going to say that there aren't the extreme sides of the Republican Party, but at least the current Republican candidate, Donald J. Trump, and the VP nominee, Vance, are not appealing to them whatsoever.
No.
They're actually disavowing them and pissing them off. We talked about the war that they're waging on them. Guess who's doing the complete opposite? Kamala Harris and Walz. If you're Jewish and you love Israel and you're pro-Israel and you're deciding to be a Democrat and vote for Kamala, then how do you explain to me this whole thing of her appeasing these protesters, essentially going behind doors and telling donors that she's thinking about possibly how to appease these extremists by perhaps putting an embargo in terms of arms trade to Israel?
Yep.
These candidates are it's almost the same thing like with black people. You're voting for a party that only wants your vote for that month.
Yep.
And then they don't do anything that actually helps you guys. The same thing with these Jewish people. If they're going to be voting for this ticket, then whatever happens to Israel in terms of U.S. relations after that is totally on them.
Absolutely. It's just such a weird place because, again, we know that the left tries to, well, the left thinks that you can do anything you want and have any views you want, and it's the truth because it's your own lived experience. It's your own reality. Well, how do you combine all these different realities into a cohesive party? You can't do it. There's too many people thinking too many things. Against postmodernism rejects meta narratives. These are these grand things that people try to work towards, like a good world based off religious morals and things like that. If there's none of that, then there's no guiding path for a group of people to be working towards. There's no goal. In their case, their goal is to have no kids. That's the goal, which is no goal at all. That's destruction and death. One thing I did pull up the letter Albert Pike to Mazzini quickly, and I wanted to read the Third World War. And if you're listening to this, listen to what he says and tell me this is not exactly what's happening. This is crazy. He wrote it in 1871. 1871.
I wasn't too far off.
No, but there weren't even computers back then. This is insane. So check this out. So he said, the Third World War must be fomented by taking advantage of the differences caused by the adjuncture of the Illuminati between the political Zionist and the leaders of the Islamist world. The war must be conducted in such a way that Islam and political Zionism mutually destroy each other. Isn't that crazy?
Oh, yeah.
It says, okay, last sentence, paragraph. Meanwhile, the other nations, once more divided on this issue, will be constrained to fight to the point of complete physical, moral, and spiritual and economic exhaustion. We shall unleash the nihilist and the atheist. The nihilists are the leftists who are having vasectomies and abortions. So he says, we shall unleash the nihilists and the atheists, and we shall provoke a formidable social cataclysm, which in all its horror will show clearly to the nations the effect of absolute atheism, origin of savagery, and of the most bloody turmoil. That's crazy.
And to the people that think that this is some crazy conspiracy theory, this letter actually exists,
Yep.
and it's in Arkansas, I believe, in some sort of library, state library, so people can actually go and see this. But in that letter, Fabian, there was also him mentioning World War I and World War II,
Yep.
like accurately,
Accurately.
right? And again, just for the people that didn't hear this, it was in 1871 that he wrote
1871.
this. So he predicted World War I being an industrial war, World War II being this, battle between big powers in terms of who will control the world
Yep.
and whatnot, right? And then the third world would be more of a religious
war.
And we are living through this, right? And not just a religious war, but also a religious war that would force the entire all other countries to be divisive over this issue, which would impact them and destroy them in the long run as well.
Absolutely, because they hate religion.
Yeah.
So they want the religions to destroy each other, and all that's left is our atheists, nihilists, and even they kill themselves. So, I mean, what's the goal here? Literally, what is the goal? For there to be no humans? How do you win there? It doesn't make any sense.
You know what's crazy about these Pike letters? The reason I know about them is because my friend and I, when COVID started, we were playing Xbox at about 4 a.m. We were just surfing the internet, and he's like, "Have you heard about the Q map?" And I was like, "What is the Q map?" Had no idea what was QAnon and all that stuff yet. And he's like, "Well, it's just this map, and I saw this one thing in there, and it said Pike letters." And I went and looked it up, and it was the Albert Pike letters. And
Wow.
he's reading it to me at like 4 a.m., and I'm just getting these chills running up my body. And then for the next 2 hours, I stayed up looking at the Q map. So don't go down the Q map, because you'll go down a very deep rabbit hole that you'll have to catch yourself before it gets to a really dark place. But yeah, I thought this was a conspiracy theory, but I looked it up. This letter actually exists. It was written in 1871 by Albert Pike, and it exists. You can go see it yourself in person in Arkansas.
I think they may have removed it. If I read it correctly, they may have removed it finally.
Oh, wow.
Because I don't think they want this stuff out there.
Yeah,
Also, he was a 33rd degree Mason, which is the highest you can get in that entire organization. So it's just a lot of weird things, and nothing happens by coincidence.
You're right. It really
Nothing
doesn't.
happens by coincidence. Quickly, I'll talk about a guy named Robert Mueller, who I've been talking about a lot.
Yes. Who's Robert Mueller?
So Robert Mueller was they call him the philosopher of the United Nations. That's literally his name.
Already a spooky title.
Already a spooky title. They nominated him for a bunch of Nobel Peace Prizes he never won. But this guy was a theosophist who worked at the United Nations and basically wrote these really, really weird letters where he acts like he speaks through the voice of Gaia, the god of the earth. And he basically lays out, he is credited for laying out the direction of the United Nations for the next I don't know, 100 years or so. And he wrote this back in, his big works were in about 1985-ish. But he writes about how the world wants to be depopulated in the voice of Gaia, the god of the earth, saying there's too many people, you're using all my resources. So someone who reads this is like, wow, this is the earth talking. But it's this guy writing like he's the earth and putting forward these crazy ideas he was a theosophist. So a theosophist is basically this sort of religion that was created in the late 1800s by this Russian mystic lady who says, I've talked to all of these. She says basically that there are masters around the world, mahats, right? Like Mahatma Gandhi means Mahat means master.
Oh, wow.
So there's always masters. Yeah, there's always spiritual people around the world that know these secrets. And she went, and a lot of them are apparently in Tibet. And she went there and she studied with them, and they all told her the secrets. And the secrets were that they have to destroy all religions, and that they know the ancient religion, the only one that can unify people. But you have to destroy all other religions to do that. So the guy who basically founded the United Nations overview was a theosophist who believed in this stuff. And part of the thing he said is that we have to depopulate. And he used the voice of the world to do that. And then he wrote down these dreams, and he had like 7,000 dreams apparently, and wrote them down. And this is what the United Nations are seeking. It's so stupid.
If these leftists actually believed in God, I feel like this man right here would be their ideal God.
Absolutely, he would.
It seems like he wrote the blueprint for what the leftists actually believe in
Yes, he
now,
did.
which is why on the DNC they're celebrating women taking an abortion pill. Fabian, I've never actually seen something like that. Like last night I made that claim and I had to go fact check myself to make sure that I was right. I was right. That it's a ritual at the DNC for women to take an abortion pill, and all these people around them absolutely go crazy about it. Like they just did something that was actually positive for them.
And they get cheered, so they feel like they're doing something good.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're getting this affirmation
Yep.
that they're always talking about, right? Like they're
Yep.
affirming their belief and oh my God. And the fact that people look at it and say, how crazy. I can't believe that people are this crazy. But Fabian, yourself, you study this stuff and you actually look at what is the ideology behind this? And every time you tell me this and I say, wow, this isn't just by chance. This isn't new stuff. This is actually it almost feels like it's on purpose, right?
Absolutely.
It was created, and now they're pushing this idea on them with this ideology attached to it.
Yeah. If you go deep enough, if you're listening to this, you're going to end up at Gnosticism and Hermeticism, which are these, and I won't get into it, but it's just really, really creepy, not even satanic, yes, satanic ideas of the world. They believe that the world that we live in is actually not the world created by God, that God is somewhere else, and the world that was created by Satan, and that we have to basically destroy everything to get to God. It's really, really weird.
That is
Very weird.
These elites scare me. That's all I can say. Because and it's not like a buzzword to call them elites. They are all elites.
Yep. You know what's crazy? When you're talking about Huma Abedin and how her dad was part of the Muslim Brotherhood and all this stuff, it's weird how a lot of these people doing really bad things always have a parent that was someone who was a Marxist or part of the Muslim Brotherhood. Kamala Harris's father was a Marxist educator, a professor on Marxism, right? Huma Abedin, her father was this guy who started that
Islamic fundamentalist,
right? Barry Obama, right? He was mentored by the person who wrote the 12 rules for radicals, Saul Alinsky. They always have these weird mentors. Even Klaus Schwab, right? His mentor was a Hegelian who is this philosopher and basically bestowed all that knowledge onto Klaus Schwab. Every one of these people has someone who taught them, and the person who taught them were very bad people. So it's no wonder why they turned out the way they did.
All their moms did such a disservice to all of humanity by not just swallowing them.
Jeez, or doing the abortion pill thing like at a DNC.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
No, but yeah, it's always taught from. But and when Kamala Harris first came out with this, we want to put a federal ban on price gouging. Everybody was so surprised about it, but you and I both kind of laughed and said, "On point, right?" Because her father is essentially a neo-Marxist. Do you think did he dive into critical race theory as well?
I haven't read too much of him. I do want to read what he would teach, but he was literally a Marxist professor, and he referenced Marx a lot. So that's who he based his whole economic theory off. And then you look at someone like Cloward Piven, the Cloward Piven strategy, which we well know means oversaturate the welfare system so it collapses and no one has anything, and then the people with nothing will demand a revolution, a socialist revolution. So all of these people are doing the exact same thing. They're just So one does it over here, one does it over here, and then they all combine to create the super Marxist. It's crazy.
Super Marxist.
Super Marxist.
We don't want to know what that's like.
No, we don't. We definitely do not. But I don't think they have any sex.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best thing, right? Is that
Thank
they're
God.
in line, right? Currently, right now, they're in line at the DNC waiting for a vasectomy. So
And they're happy about it.
they're really happy about it.
Oh my gosh. It's typically a person gets a vasectomy after they've had so many kids that they don't want anymore. These people are getting it before they even have, just not to have any, right? That wasn't the purpose of a vasectomy.
Good, I mean, I gave you the example about Israel yesterday. All they're doing is just impacting their own movement and ideology, right? Because they're not going to be able to be represented in Congress if there's not too many of them because they're not populating, right? And guess who is populating? Religious people, conservatives, right? Progressives are the ones that are anti-family right now.
Yep.
So
Oh, actually, I just learned this. I think you told me, and I think the number's correct. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think you said there's around 10 million Jewish people in the whole world or something like that.
there's 15 million in the whole world.
15 million. How many Muslim people are there in the whole world?
Over a billion.
Over a billion.
Yeah.
But the Jewish people are the biggest threat?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
what percentage is 15 million of like 1.5 billion?
Well, Fabian, it's because they're overly represented in media companies and pharmaceutical companies. Maybe it's because Ashkenazi IQ is about 15 points higher than the average IQ.
So they take these positions that use their mind more.
Correct. And Asians do this as well.
Asians do it as well.
Indians do this as well.
Indians.
White people do this as well. There just so happens to be still a super majority of Americans who are white. So that's why it may seem like they're not as represented in these successful places. But yeah, I always go back to this thing of like, it's such a ridiculous claim to say that Jews control everything. And that's why everything is so bad in the world. It's the same thing that Hitler would propagate to his people. And it is the exact same thing that leftists have accused white people of for, I don't know, the last 10, 15 years that I've been paying attention. The leftists and the media are the ones that say it's because of whites, it's because we have a white supremacy and everything is white institutionalized or whatever. It's because of that minorities are suffering in America. Well, these idiots like Candace Owens who were attacking that narrative are suddenly using that exact same narrative against Jews. Just replace white with Jews and they sound exactly like the leftists did, right? All of a sudden, instead of whites controlling everything and that's why everything is bad to minorities, it's because Jews control everything and that's why it's bad for minorities.
I really hope that Candace Owens is doing all this. I'll say it in an honest way. I don't know how else to say it, right? I hope that she's really doing it because she thinks she's doing the right thing. I really hope it's not that she's getting money from, I don't know, let's just say like the Muslim Brotherhood or just any organization that has ulterior motives. I don't know her finances. I don't know what. I'm sure she's making a lot of money. I know she has subscriptions, YouTube channels and stuff like that. So I don't know what it is, but I wish I could know. And I think the further that, the further along we get in time, the more we'll be exposed to what the real things are or what's the real motivation behind it.
I honestly feel like if we all challenge them to actually disclose where they're getting their money from, well, they won't do it for the precise reason that I believe that they are being paid to parrot this anti-Israel garbage.
Definitely could be.
Because you have to think about it. A lot of them also support Putin for some reason. It's not that they're like anti-Ukraine, which is a fine position to have, but it's weird to be pro-Putin as a conservative because everything that Putin implements in Russia completely goes against the very own conservative values that we fight for here in America. Whether
like
it's
freedom.
Freedom, right? Fair elections, for example. They don't have fair elections.
No, they do not.
They don't have an actual opposition there. They lock up their opposition and kill their opposition. That sounds a lot of what we're fighting here in America. We're fighting against censorship and the right for freedom of speech. In Russia, they don't have freedom of speech. Whatever you may think of the war, you should be able to at least protest your government. But in Russia, if you mention the word war, you'll be put in jail for 15 years right away.
Absolutely.
You can donate money as an American citizen to Ukraine, travel to America, and then end up in jail for 10 years because you're abetting an enemy.
Yeah.
That is what conservatives suddenly found themselves supporting, and it's absolutely crazy.
One thing that Putin has done very, very well, and he's an incredibly smart person. There's no doubt about that.
No doubt whatsoever.
No doubt. He has really used this leftist, the growth of this leftism to really counterbalance that and saying Russia is a Christian nation. We don't do this leftist stuff. We're anti-LGBTQ. He's a powerful leader. So I can see why some people are like, yeah, let's point to Putin as maybe a good guy or maybe a guy who does good things, but he's not. and he doesn't do good things for his people. But if you're looking at it from 1,000-mile view away, like let's say we're here in America, we see these things happen. We see Russia's at war, but you don't really see too much about actual Russia, right? About the people who lived in Russia, maybe just Moscow, St. Petersburg, but not like Vladivostok and all these places. You don't ever see that. So if that's all you're getting, he's doing a very good job at making his media only showing the good things about it. Thank you for sticking around for so long. If you've made it to the end, we really appreciate you. Please share this with your friends. Thank you for watching and tune in for tomorrow's episode.